Hotep, peace be unto you, and welcome to KRST Unity Center of African Spiritual Science.
How about that? I've been back in the United States since Tuesday evening. I was gone for the better part of 7 weeks, and I traveled to 5 or 6 different countries. I did a lot of stuff. And one time, in fact, in the sedan, I actually uttered the expression, I've been waiting to say this for a long time. This is some Indiana Jones stuff. But I didn't say stuff, okay, riding through the desert. So I've just been back, and I've been trying to rest up. I've got a couple things going on. A new book that I'm pushing to have out in about a week and a half, and a big photo exhibit in Washington, D.C. at the Thurgood Marshall Center very soon. So I've been working on that and a few other things. I've got a group I'm taking to West Africa early in January. But I thought about this program, and I haven't spoken here in a while. And I really admire our brother Enoch here, very, very hard worker and a brilliant in his own way. So I wanted to do something with him. I've been wanting to do that for a while. And also, I know I have this calendar that just came out. Fortunately, we got it out very early, way back at the end of August, as a matter of fact, and it's called Black Men of the Nile, Kings of Kemet and Kush. So I wanted to do a presentation before I take off again in honor of Baba Mary Kara, Pastor Bird. And so a lot of the focus today will be on black men by two African men, in honor of one of our greatest, okay? So we want to welcome you. Now, I'm going to introduce Enoch whenever we're ready, and he's going to speak for a while, 20, 30 minutes, and he's going to talk about some of his work, which I admire a great deal, and then I'm going to come and do 2 presentations. One will be to promote the calendar that I just spoke of, and also just to share with you some of the highlights visually of my recent travels. So that's the program for today. We want to thank KRST Unity for hosting us, Baba Mary Kara, Brother Abid, Sister Teta Sherry, Sister Erica, all the members of KRST Unity who always work hard to make this work, all right? So that's the program we're going to deal with today, all right? If we run over, it'll be cool, because, hey, I'm just in a good mood. I'm not going to rush. I want to share with you these pictures, a lot of what you'll be seeing, nobody's seen before. So we're going to have a good afternoon. Ashe?
Ashe.
All right, whenever you're ready.
How's everyone doing today? What I want to talk about is my journey is I want to understand between African independence and African invasion. You know, because growing up in the school that I went to, I felt like it was implied that we did not have any history that predates colonization. You know, being stolen, kidnapped, and shackled, put it in cargo ships, and shipped over to the Americas, and Plymouth Rock landed on top of us, and still there. And so, and that our people, I felt like I was taught, and same with my siblings, they felt the same way when I asked them the question about our history, is that basically we were primitive, which is, I have no issue about it now, because primitive means, prime means the first, but it was implied that primitive is being someone that's that has challenges. And I felt like our history was taught like we were living in bushes before colonization, and you know, with some dust and maybe even an African booty scratcher. And so, no, because there were jokes going around, but it really wasn't jokes though. It's not funny. And then as I start to do some research, I realized there's a lot of information and facts to support, you know, African had, you know, that achieved civilization. I would take it further and say high culture. So that led to the timeline. So I want to know, and then when I would start to study materials about who we are, I feel like to develop the timeline, I wanted to understand what came first, second, third, fourth, et cetera, in chronological order, and then with the visuals, with the facts and the dates. And then in doing that, and I did that to help me to understand our history. So now when I revisit and study great scholars like we have right here, Runoko Rashidi, like he talking about on the Black Man of the Nile, Kings of Kemet and Kush. And so when I read through his material and his other books and the other ones like, Dr. Ben and some of, other well-known scholars, I use the timeline so I can look and see what's going on chronologically, So then after the timeline was developed and then had our brother, Dr. Runoko Rashidi, peer review it and help assist on it, I really appreciate him for this, So I'm explaining the foundation right now about how to read a timeline, because after I got done with it, I realized a lot of people didn't even understand how to read a timeline. What is BC? How to understand AD. Matter of fact, what is BCE? And what is CE? And so I'm going to explain that for those who may or may not understand what that is, and of how to read a timeline. So BC, so you would have 0, and when you go on BC or before Common Era, I look at it as like going negative, going that way and back into human history. And then from 0 going positive, coming up to the 2019 of today. So that would be used as AD, a no dominee, or like the Christian, that would be a Christian concept for my report. Everyone has their own reports where they study information and put in their human brain computer and come to their own truth or analysis. And then Common Era will be synonymous with AD, what is usually known in this society as AD. CE would be more like the academic approach, meaning in Common Era. And before that, what would be BC would be used as before Common Era. So we use before Common Era and Common Era in the timeline to keep it academic. So we're going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to explain on what between African independence and African invasions, what happened to our people. And for my report, I noticed that there is broken down basically, though our people did not break it down this way, Manetho and other scholars, into 4 different golden ages, as I'm going to explain in a minute. And there have been some periods of intermediate periods, some periods of uncertainty, maybe political unrest, or chaos, etc. I don't know if that's a good way to explain it, but that's how I understand it. So on this timeline right here, this first timeline is dealing with the Africans' independence, when the Africans govern their own affairs and control their own narrative, without any outside intervention. I do notice there is a little discrepancy. That started the first dynasty. So keep in mind there is more dynasties before Narmer. My report showing there's more dynasties before Narmer. From the time of Narmer, which is the first dynasty, or 0 to 1st, to the 25th dynasty is said to be roughly around 3,000 years. Said to be around 3,000 years. And so with Narmer, he started what is known as the Old Kingdom, the Temple Age. The Temple Age, because a lot of temples is going up, being constructed, the pyramids and other projects around this era, this time frame. As you can see there, you can see the great pyramids of Giza with Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, his grandson. Khufu, his son Khafre, and his grandson Menkaure, which those 3. The smallest one to the right looks like the smallest one is the biggest one out of the 3, but it's just further back in distance. After the first golden age, there was a break, as you can see from the transition from that yellow to the green. That break, that transition, is the break of the intermediate period. So the Old Kingdom is said to be from 0 to the 6th dynasty. And then after that, you see that the Middle Kingdom, it jumps to the Middle Kingdom, but before then, you'll see that the intermediate period would consist, is missing, is the 7th dynasty, 8th dynasty, 9th, and the 10th. Those are said to be the period of instability or political unrest and issues going on where the people is not so politically unified. After that intermediate period, the first intermediate period, it was the unification came again, this time being what you see right there as a brother named Menhotep II, right there in the green. And it's said to be around 2040 before Common Era. So he is the founder, is said to be the founder of what's known as the Middle Kingdom, better known as the Second Golden Age. Golden Age of high achievement, high culture, and civilization. Coming down, you can see that there's other prominent, you can't put all the people, because remember from the 1st to the 25th is a time span of 3,000 years. So there is no way I can put all those images of the people, how they were depicted within that. So just had to pick some of the prominent and just put them in there and do the best we can with it. So we know after during the Middle Kingdom, you see that Kipikarius versus the first is on there. You have the Epet Asut right there, and we have the math papyri coming in to play as well. There was after that, the Middle Kingdom, there was a second intermediate period. Remember, of political unrest or chaos, or something happens where politically it's just not so much unified. During this, another point I want to point out about this intermediate period is that what really stood out to me about this intermediate period is that it was a period where from my report, our ancestors, the African ancestors, allowed some refugees to come in and to settle in the area of Avarice. And in that region right there, they gave them, they were presented with the house rules of Maat, true justice, righteousness, balance, and order, and reciprocity. The principles that this Senate right here is predicated off of, is the foundation of it. They're more ethical codes, to live a good life. And out of that balance of basically, not violating people's human rights, the animal rights, the oil, the soil, the air, and universal laws. The opposite was said to be Isfet. The Greeks call it Apophis, which would be the opposite of the principles that I told you of truth, untruth. Righteousness, where it was the opposite. This society was predicated off of Ma'at, true justice, righteousness, balance, order, and reciprocity, and way beyond. The Hekakasut, the Hyksos, the refugees, the Africans show compassion and allowed to come and camp in on their territory, gradually got some power and tried to take advantage and control Northeast Africa. Not all Africa, just Northeast Africa. And for about 150, maybe 200 years, I think it said around 6 dynasties, they last around 6 dynasties. And then the Africans of the Nile Valley came together and expelled those Hyksos and started, and then after that was done, it was started with the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom, which is the temple and the imperial age, because you see a lot of temples and the empires is being constructed around that time. Also, I want to mention, I forgot to mention, backtrack on the Middle Kingdom. That's the literary age, because a lot of the literature, as you can see the papyrus down there, is being elaborated. Back to the New Kingdom, the temple and imperial age. Who is said to found this is Pharaoh or King Ahmose and his wife, which is almost Nefertari, as you can see her right there. Other parts and of the New Kingdom consist of 18th, 19th, and the 20th dynasty. What is very important about the New Kingdom and very popular is the finding of the discovery of King Tut's tomb by grave robbers. Some people can use the narrative and say discoverers, like they're there and just, on a vacation and accidentally stumbled across this tomb. My report did not show that. It showed that they were foreigners inside of Africa there to steal and to take back to their countries and report and give it to their officials who they show allegiance to. Another thing that makes a lot of these, the Egyptian very popular, I realize, is King Tut's tomb in the year it's said to be 1922 with Howard Carter. That's being the grave robber I'm referring to. I'm not going to call him a discoverer, because maybe from your report you may find that, but for mine, I'm showing him as a grave robber, because when he came across King Tut's tomb, it is said to be on accident. It was fully intact because it was assumed that all the other grave, where our ancestors buried our ancestors in the graveyard, has been ransacked, because foreigners understood that we buried our ancestors. We held them with high esteem, and so we would bury them with gold and other precious minerals. And other foreigners, they knew this, so they wanted to come in so they can, steal. King Tut's tomb, however, was intact, and it was like hidden behind another chamber. And so when they went in, when Howard Carter and his team went in there, then they were able to, look and see what's going on and take a report of what's going in there, an inventory, and then later on present it, to the world public, and still doing it. As you see, King Tut was presented here in LA in 2018 and 2019, then went on to other parts around the world to make money, but the money does not go to the people who are descendants of the ancestors of their ancestors. Also, I noticed that King Tut, with these different invaders, from what was shown of how he looked and how I read about him in the book, I would see the images and it would show some black African people with dark melanin. And then in the books from invaders, which we'll see on timeline number 2, I noticed from their perspective, they would show King Tut that represent them. And I even noticed the Arabs, who also came in as invaders, which we'll talk about on timeline number 2, portrays it similar from my report. Other people's report may show something different. And so when I would read this would screw me over and be all discombobulated in my head. And then I'll see the real ones. I was like, why don't you show the real ones? Then I learned from one of my professors, oh yeah, because the winners of history gets to rewrite history. So now I understand that this is from the perspective when I get a book and I see who the author is. And if I see that the image is, information's maybe in there, but when I saw the images, I understand, and the image doesn't reflect what the fact shows, then I would look at the author, do a little research on it, and then see, does he look, is he from the same culture? And if not, then I can see that the image that's depicted by this author, is it depicted to reflect the author and his ancestors? And I found that there's a lot of that. And that's another reason why I say, well, we need to create a timeline, because even our people who, I understand that this is my ancestor, but reading it, the way it's discombobulated and not discombobulated, you can assume that these are not African people, because we don't control Hollywood and Paramount and stuff like that, so they're going to tell it from their perspective. So enough on that, on the New Kingdom, which after, well, not yet, let me go, after that there was another intermediate period, and then after which lasted from the 21st dynasty it said to the 24th dynasty. And then after that, we came out with the 25th dynasty. And with the 25th dynasty, some of the prominent ones you see there is Amin Idris, the godwife of Anmun, Shibaku, and you see Shibaku's son right there, the Horn Makhet. And above him, you see Taharka. And I came out of Christianity. He was in the book. When I remember reading about Taharka in the Bible. Excuse me. And then Karakamun above him, also of the 25th dynasty, that we know that our brother Anthony Browder is excavating out there in ancient Kemet. We appreciate him. And this is where Runoko said that he'll be leaving and going to, dealing with. One thing about that Shibaku stone, the reason why that went there and not the Rosetta Stone, is that I noticed this is in a British museum, and it's not too far from our report when I looked in the museum next to the Rosetta Stone, but it appeared that most of the people that go to the exhibit, they would look at they'll focus on the Shibaku stone, and this would just be non-existent, it appeared to me. And real quick about the history of the Shibaku stone is that pharaoh, Shibaku, it is said that when he became pharaoh, that he was presented with a parchment, a papyri that was ancient. It was so old it was moth-eaten and it was falling apart. And he understood that the information was so profound and so significant that he said that this needed to be preserved forever. And so to do that, he transferred it over to stone, to rock. Because we know that rocks is billions of years old, and you put that information on it, it's going to be around forever. Building for eternity, providing somebody don't break it and shatter, which does happen later on. So he put that information, and it was so old that this stone is said to go back to the Old Kingdom. That's how old it is. So he had that transferred on there, and it became known as, is most famous known as the Ptah Stellar, or the Memphite theology of Memphite or Nefer of Memphis. And so, which is one of the main shrines or temple sites, very prominent to the people of the Nile Valley. So and the story in it is profound. When you read about Stolen Legacy by Georgine James, he goes into the Memphite theology, those who want to read that. And there's other sources that really go into this and let you know what this information is really about. And it talks about the African creation stories from their perspective, before any colonization, and they're able to control the narrative and put their 2 cents into it, which I realize does happen later on in their journey, but not at this time. So after the 25th dynasty, I noticed that the Africans does have some issues with the Assyrians, and eventually Northeast Africa, not all Africa. This is Lower Kemet. And so after that, I noticed that eventually the Assyrians does come into power, and they control part of Northeast Africa, of Kemet, or Egypt. After the Assyrians, we know that the Persians came in and took it, challenged the Assyrians, and they were in there for a minute, controlling the narrative, had the people, prisoners of war, subjugated in the areas they control, Northeast Africa. And then after that, they fell victim to the Greeks. And then after the Greeks, we noticed that the Romans came in and took it from the Greeks. For me, when I see Greco-Roman, this society is predicated off of Greek and Roman society. I basically, that's European to me. Greco-Roman is European. That's how I translate it in today's time. After the Romans, we know that as you see there is Gaius Julius Caesar, the time being around 46 before Common Era, because we wonder how did we get on the zero and all this. Was the African construct. The answer is, from my report, is no. Gaius Julius Caesar, again, the year is around 46 before Common Era, as you can see right there, he changed the time and also the calendar, the map. So, and then after zero, about 500 years after that, we know, or 501 years after, roughly, we know that the Arabs come in, challenge the Romans, take it from them, and they've been in power since then to 2019. So that narrative, and so when they come in, the remnants of some of the rest of them does stay there or gets admixed in with the people, I noticed. So I feel like this right here could be used as a curriculum for our people when they talk about our history in Americas or other places. It seems like it starts at us being stolen hostages or enslaved people, and just talk about our journey as stolen hostages. And I feel like that right there is not enough to uplift our people to where we can be proud about our history or stuff, but to show some point of our part of our history when we did rule our own affairs or govern our own affairs, and we achieved high culture or civilization. Another thing I want to point out is back to timeline number 1. Again, I came up in the Christian era and also in the Islamic on my father's side. So we had both worlds. And I noticed that when I want to know about African independence, and I want to focus on our story, when it's pure, authentic, before any outside invasion, for me, I look to the oldest text on this entire planet. If you want to look at the oldest story of creation, how people got here and all that, I found my report led to the pyramid text, which is also at the Old Kingdom, and it's the 5th dynasty, and it's the pyramid text of Unis. I noticed there's other ones, Pepi, and Pepi the First, Second, and Teddy, and also even during the Middle Kingdom, I noticed of some of the coffin texts are purely African. That's their culture. Without any. Before the Hekakasu came in and, put a little. That's me. But most of this is African culture, is how they govern, how they look to govern their own affairs, and their own culture. So between independence and the second one, between African invasion, when people be like, oh yeah, well this is cool, then how do we end up, if we did all that, how do we end up the like we did? That's what timeline number 2 will show, all the invaders that came in chronological order, one after another, and discombobulated our reality. And it's still like that to this day. And so if those that want to get back to the foundation about what was the African thought when we govern our own affairs, you would have to go to the Nile Valley, the origin being Kilimanjaro up there by Uganda and Kenya. And so that's that. And then the other piece, as you can see, has been on my yacht, the judgment scene. I felt like that was important too, because that was a more ethical code that how the Africans of the Nile Valley used to govern their own society, their own affairs, and to keep it balanced. And with that, I'm finished, and we'll let Runoko.
No, why don't you take a few questions?
Okay. Is there any questions, comments, or statements anyone may want to add to what I just mentioned? Feel free. Where did the Hyksos come? The Hyksos come from their from my report. They're a combination of various cultures that came to the African from Asia, that came to the African doorpost and basically asked for for sympathy. They're refugees. We have nowhere to go. We'll go home. I can't go home. We got invaded, and so same go with in their country. In their country. So could you show us some compassion? Can we? Yeah, we'll let you stay here. Give them here's our rules, the house rule. Learn these, and you can acclimate into our society. But we see that it did not happen like that eventually, So they were refugees. I'm not going to call them invaders, because my report doesn't show that they came in like the ones that you see on timeline number 2, as they came in with the mindset of plunder, discombobulate the reality, break stuff, and control your narrative. For me, I notice it's all about the controlling of the narrative. Whoever controlled the official narrative, most people understand it from that perspective. So this narrative is mostly dominated in the world from an invader's perspective. Most people are going to know this, including myself, when I learned it's from the invader's perspective. But I feel like that these timelines in chronological order can help, help with that discombobulation that may be going on in.
Okay, in the beginning you talked about BC, and you say that's before Common Era?
Yes.
BC?
Yes.
Okay, and did you mention AD?
Yeah.
But what I want to know is when and who started using BC in reference to the time? Did that begin in Africa? Did that begin when they started to write? Or do you know when it began?
Well, I think what you're asking, as I mentioned up there on timeline number 2, is that the year is said to be 46 before Common Era.
Before Common Era.
Or BC, whatever most of the time when you read books, it's going to say BC.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll say BCE, so you think, is that something totally different? It's synonymous.
Well, some people say it's before Christ.
That's what BC, that would be BC. So remember I said that's a Christian,
Yeah, that's a Christian's perspective.
that's a Christian narrative.
Okay.
So when you see the AD and BC, that is a Christian narrative.
Okay.
But we live in a society that is multicultural and everyone is not Christian. So when you use BCE or Common Era, before Common Era or Common Era, which is the conversion of BC or AD, therefore that's more academic to where it should be equaling out the playing field. That makes sense.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So in this society, most people know it BC or BC or AD, but AD, that's a no dominee in the year. It's a Christian term again, and for my report, it comes out to the year of our Lord. So the Lord being Jesus.
After death.
Or after death. And so I will use like I said, before Common Era, because this was designed to be academic, scholarly, and to be museum ready, worthy. Any other questions? Well, if there's no other questions, I'm gonna give the floor.
Well, I don't have any questions, but I want to commend you for the hard work. Very, very detailed work.
Thank you.
And it's an extremely valuable resource, a valuable tool.